What I am about to suggest for the BYU men's basketball program has the potential to go absolutely viral, but I believe it's in their best interest if they want to go deep in the NCAA tournament. What is it? They need to bench Egor Demin.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Go to FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, coming up on today's show, we're talking about a critical lineup change I think BYU needs to make in their best interest if they want to be a March Madness darling and make a run in the NCAA tournament. We'll also talk about why so many national pundits are absolutely in love with BYU and having them advancing far into this tournament. And we'll finish up on a football note with the BYU football program taking to the practice field today for their first scrimmage of spring camp. All right, I said it in the open. I believe that BYU's chances of advancing in the NCAA tournament and playing deep into said tournament rest on a lineup change, and that is moving Egor Demin from the starting lineup to the bench. That's a controversial take. He's been in that spot all season long. He was this freshman darling, has had some absolutely highlight reel moments as BYU's starting point guard. But we have seen lately, as BYU has played deeper and deeper into this season, especially when it came to the Big 12 tournament, when Egor Demin was struggling, Kevin Young was quicker and quicker to yank him out of the game when he was struggling. And it's very clear, at least from the last, I'd say, two games in particular, the Big 12 tournament, that Egor is not operating at peak efficiency. And there is an argument to be made that he's a freshman. He should come back and run it back with BYU for another year. That's another conversation for another day. I'm strictly speaking right now about BYU's best opportunity to beat the 11th seed VCU Rams and go on a March Madness run. I believe you need to flip Egor Demin for Dallin Hall. Dallin Hall is a veteran. He has played in big games before. He understands the stage BYU is stepping onto. And that's not to say that Egor Demin doesn't understand that, because he's played for Real Madrid over there in Europe. He's played in some Euro League type competition. But the lights are brighter than ever now, and it's a one-and-done scenario here in the NCAA tournament. And more so, BYU has not advanced in the NCAA tournament in 14 years. It's been since 2011 that they have advanced, and that was the Jimmer Fredette era. They have won a first four win over Iona in that time, and everything else one and done in the NCAA tournament. I have said on this podcast multiple times that for this season to be considered a success, BYU has to advance in the NCAA tournament, and I believe they wholly can do that. But it's going to be dependent on having, I think, a veteran voice and a veteran hand on the ball at the point guard spot. And that is why I would flip Egor Demin for Dallin Hall. VCU, and I talked about it on yesterday's podcast, I am terrified of this first round matchup. And a couple of you have tried to assuage my fears, assuage, whatever, have tried to say, hey, Jake, go watch the George Mason game. That'll calm you down, and watch any of VCU. I understand that they are playing in a G5 league. I understand that they have been a team that has not played nearly as much and is not as battle-tested as this BYU basketball team is. But what they are is they can attack BYU at its weak points, and one of those key things is turnovers. Live ball turnovers have been absolutely crippling for BYU, and Egor Demin has had a lot of those and in critical moments for this BYU basketball team. That is why I think in this circumstance, Kevin Young, I know he's reticent to change things up. He's been rolling with this lineup, especially Egor Demin as a starting point guard all season long. And I asked him the question yesterday during his press conference, are you considering anything like that? I said, I'm a guy who likes to kind of keep it how it is. You've got a 10-man rotation. Well, the 10-man rotation still stays intact. I'm just telling you, flip Egor for Dallin. And I think the success chances for BYU, the greater chances of success are if Dallin Hall is your starting point guard here in the big dance. Like I said, it's nothing personal against Egor. It's just simply put, I think that BYU has a better chance of controlling the action, controlling the tempo, the pace, limiting the turnovers and allowing BYU to play more their style of basketball and impose their will on VCU on Thursday with Dallin Hall as a starting point guard. I think that Egor Demin in many respects actually would do better as a second unit point guard right now, because I don't think VCU has near the depth that BYU has. So in theory, when Dallin Hall gets switched out as the starting point guard, Egor steps in, and he should be able to dominate more fully against a second string Rams unit versus going up against their top guard line. Call me crazy, but I really think that outside of that, BYU's got a very, very strong lineup, deep lineup. It's diverse, it's talented, it's got everything you need to make a deep NCAA tournament run. And I'll say this one more time. I think if BYU can get past VCU, the bracket opens up wide open for BYU. I'm not scared of Wisconsin. I'm not necessarily as scared of Alabama in a potential Sweet 16 matchup. BYU could find themselves making a run to the Elite Eight here, but you've got to get past this first round alignment, because I just think VCU, the way that they are so defensive oriented, they're red hot coming into this game. They've won 18 of 20. Was it 12 of 13 coming into this tournament? Much like BYU, they're riding a heater coming in here, and you've got to be able to cool that off. So I really do like BYU's chances. For those of you who have reached out and said, Jake, you need to relax. I just think that if BYU wants to do what they hope to do here in the NCAA tournament, full focus, obviously, has to go on the VCU Rams. And I think the success goes up. The chances of success, BYU's a chance at advancing, because if you look at the BPI, the money lines, all that type of stuff, it's a pretty close matchup. VCU is a top 30 KenPom team. BYU obviously is inside that top 30 as well. This is not your typical 6-11 matchup. Last year, BYU had a record disparity in terms of the overall money line, or not the money line, the spread. It was 11.5 points, I think, at tip-off, which was a record for a 6-11 matchup. Right now, our friends at FanDuel have it at 3.5, and that's pretty tight for a 6-11 matchup. BPI, the Basketball Percentages Index on ESPN, has a 57% chance for BYU to advance past the VCU Rams. Tony Jones from The Athletic, a good friend and obviously a longtime writer here in the community, he and I are of a like mind. He said it himself. He's actually more scared of VCU against BYU than he is of BYU against Wisconsin, even though Wisconsin's the 3 seed and VCU is the 11 seed. So all things summed up, TLDR, too long didn't read. I think BYU needs just to flip-flop the lineup, make Dallin Hall their starting point guard, and watch, I think, more success in March come as a result of that. Could I be wrong about this? Am I likely to be wrong about it? Probably, because like I said, Kevin Young's not very keen, it sounds like, on making that change. But I believe it's in BYU's best interest if they want to make noise here in March, to make Dallin Hall their starting point guard. All right, coming up next, we're going to flip over and talk about why the national pundits out there, a number of them, have BYU making that deep run I just referenced to the Elite Eight, etc. Why are they so high on the Cougars? We'll try and make heads and tails of it next, right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Factor. Eating healthy doesn't have to be complicated, my friends. With Factor, you get chef-made, dietitian-approved meals that are ready to eat and heat in just 2 minutes. Think about that. So you can fuel your body without the hassle of cooking. The best part is Factor meals arrive fresh, never frozen, with over 40 options across 8 dietary preferences each week. You can customize your menu to fit your goals, whether that's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, and a whole lot more. The best part is convenience meets nutrition here, with Factor keeping you on track with healthy, delicious meals without the time-consuming prep. Like I said, you heat and eat in less than 2 minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started today at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use the code factorpodcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code factorpodcast at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box, and do it with our friends over at Factor. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Supply House. Now, Supply House gets you the supplies you need from the site, from the skilled tradesmen out there. Supply House gets you plumbing, HVAC, electrical equipment, no matter what you need. Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right, plus with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 top brands. You'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. You don't have to be anywhere in particular. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service. You'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free TradeMaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every single order. So join the TradeMaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM. Start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks and get the things that you need. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com using the promo code SH5 to save 5%. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well on this Monday. BYU, the 6th seed going into the NCAA tournament, facing off against the 11th seed VCU Rams. Some familiarity for these two programs. If you've been paying attention, Ryan Odom, the head coach of the VCU Rams, was a head coach at Utah State, faced BYU twice, and owns a career record as a head coach, speaking of Odom, of 0-2 against the Cougars. They obviously played in the 2020, 2021, and 21-22 seasons between the Aggies and the Cougars. Max Shulga, their leading guard, speaking of VCU, was a player at Utah State as well. Played very sparingly. I think it was only like 4 minutes, I think, across the two matchups that BYU and Utah State played when Ryan Odom was coaching them, but he has blossomed into the A10 player of the year this year. So a lot going for VCU, but the national media, man, they absolutely love the BYU Cougars. We have seen guys like Seth Davis. He thinks that BYU has everything it needs to make a run here to the Elite Eight. The quote he used, if you like points, and I know you guys do, this is the region for you, speaking of the East region that BYU is playing in, I actually think BYU has enough to get to the Elite Eight. Some high praise from Seth Davis, Mr. Sharpie himself. Those of you who are on social media know exactly what I'm talking about, but he's not the only one. Rob Doster from the Phil68.com, who has actually been a champion of BYU for most of the season. I will give Rob his credit. He really believes that BYU has the pieces to make a run here. You also have guys out there like Andy Katz, who has BYU going to Newark, New Jersey to play against Duke in the Elite Eight. He says, I have Duke advancing, but he thinks that BYU can roll through and play in an Elite Eight format. This is awesome. This is high praise. And this is, I think, well-deserved honors from BYU, well-deserved honors for BYU. But should we be concerned that the national media believes so much in BYU, conversely, against the recent track record of one and dones in the NCAA tournament? That's the only concern I harbor here for this. We're also seeing some of the athletes out there, or those celebrity brackets out there. I saw Cooper DeJean of the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously a Super Bowl champion. He has BYU in the Elite Eight. A lot of people, I think that's the ceiling. If you were to run into Duke, speaking of BYU in the Elite Eight, going up against Cooper Flagg and company, I get that. But the biggest thing for me is, why do the national media believe in BYU? I think they point directly, at least in my mind, to the fact that BYU has a very experienced roster. I just talked about earlier about why I think Dallin Hall should be BYU's starting point guard here in March Madness. But you look at Richie Saunders, you look at guys like Fousseyni Traore, Trevin Nell, on down the list. There's a ton of experience residing on this BYU roster, and experience plays a major factor in the NCAA tournament. Other things that play a factor, shot making. This is a BYU team that is, at one point, I think they may very well still be this, was the number one team in the Big 12 in terms of getting to the bucket and shooting threes. It's a very NBA-esque offense that Kevin Young has implemented with BYU, but it's obviously worked to great effect outside of playing against the likes of Houston, which you look at this bracket, there's not really a Houston-like team on there outside of what I think is VCU, but even VCU is much less experienced in terms of the overall caliber of opponent than a Houston Cougars squad. So that's, I think, why BYU is this darling for a lot of people when they're filling out their brackets. They were going to be a trendy pick. We already knew that. The way that BYU plays is very aesthetically pleasing. It's a fun style of basketball. I'll admit, you guys know, if you're a longtime listener, that I frankly struggled to watch a lot of college basketball outside of BYU. I will watch Utah. I will watch Utah State, UVU, the other local programs, because my radio job entails watching those teams. But I'm telling you, I'm not watching Duke, North Carolina by and large, because simply put, I'd rather watch an NBA game. The stylistic differences between the NBA and college basketball are what pushed me towards watching the NBA, because it's more aesthetically pleasing. Higher shot making, better overall defense without having to grab everybody like Houston does or Iowa State does. But I think the style BYU plays has a lot of people enthralled with them. And that's why I think you're seeing this national media coverage saying, hey, watch out for the BYU Cougars. I sure hope they're right. They are talking heads who watch, like I said, a lot more college basketball than I do. I will always defer to the Seth Davises. I will always defer to Rob Dosser. I will always defer to guys like Andy Katz because they do this for a living. They watch college basketball every single night. And the fact that they watch it and they believe this heavily in BYU, that's awesome. So let's take faith that these national pundits, they know what they're talking about. Because if they do, BYU will be that March Madness darling, and we could watch them advancing to the Elite Eight for just the second time in program history. Remember, 1981, and Greg Wrubell put it out there. When BYU advanced in 1981 to the Elite Eight, came out of the East region, had to beat an A-10 team, had to face off against a potential Big Ten team in the second round. Everything seems to be lining up here for BYU to repeat what Danny Ainge did. Now, we'll be 44 years later. It'd be crazy to think that could come to fruition, but I'd love it. I would love to cover it, obviously. I have an ill-timed vacation next week if it does come to fruition, but the vacation actually works out where I'll be able to still have plenty of coverage, but it's just, it's awesome to see BYU being the darling that they are. And let's hope and pray that they prove these national pundits right, these national talking heads, because Lord only knows that if BYU crashes out in the first round, that's going to have some people saying, well, now BYU, they're going to turn on BYU. And that's the tough part to stomach here. If this BYU team can't get it done, remember, last year there were so many people that thought that BYU could make a run under Mark Pope. They were a three-happy team, and when they were hitting, they were very capable of winning. When they weren't, obviously, they were very much vulnerable, and they lost to Duquesne. And this year, it feels like this team is much more well-rounded. I know that they're going to get the moniker that they're very three-heavy, live by the three, die by the three. It's not necessarily this BYU team. They have the capability of playing inside the arc if need be, but obviously, if they can hit from deep, they can hang with anybody. And you look at what happened against the likes of Iowa State in the NCAA tournament. They can shoot 18 of 36, 50% from beyond the three. But then the very next night, shoot 21%. Was it 6 of 28 or whatever they shot against Houston? You got to find a little more balance from the three-point line. And if they do that, they very well could prove the Dosters, just these national talking heads, these pundits, these analysts who absolutely think BYU has what it takes to make a run here. I hope they go prove them wrong, because that would just be an absolutely magical, fun time to watch this BYU Cougar squad do their thing. And we'll see if they're right, or if BYU makes a fool of themselves in front of the national audience once again. And that would be very tough to stomach, because if this team can't get it done, man, I'd be hard-pressed to think what it's going to take for BYU to get a run going in the NCAA tournament outside of having the National Player of the Year in Jimmer Fredette and Danny Ainge, who are the two who have driven BYU the deepest in the NCAA tournament in recent memory. All right, coming up next, we're going to flip over and finish off with some BYU football. I know some of you are football junkies. Don't want to leave you guys high and dry on this Monday with a lot of basketball talk, but it's a very big day ahead for BYU football, and it's because they're taking part in their first and maybe only true scrimmage of spring camp. What's at stake for the BYU football program? We'll delve into that next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys to have some fun in March Madness. Obviously, we're all enthralled with the brackets. We're all filling them out. Well, FanDuel is helping you get the chance to get on the action like never before. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, like I hope BYU is, to even who's cutting down the nets. It's all available to you from our friends over at FanDuel. So go online right now with tournament games happening almost every day starting tomorrow. There's always something exciting to bet on, and you can do it in a very simple and easy to use app with our friends at FanDuel. And the best part is you get paid out instantly. There's no waiting around when you want to collect your winnings. So visit FanDuel.com and get on the college hoops action all tournament long. Once again, get that $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits, and get started today with our friends over at FanDuel. Today's show is also brought to you by one of our great local sponsors. That's the Post District. Discover Post District, home to 4 of Salt Lake's newest and most stylish apartment buildings, the Register, Post House North, Post House South, and the 801 Flats. Each one of these residences offers its own unique take on the luxury of urban living, with features like waterfall kitchen islands, floor-to-ceiling windows, vaulted ceilings, and spacious patios and walk-in closets. The best part is you can enjoy premium amenities alongside your new home, including the city's largest residential gym, a year-round pool, golf simulator, massive TV wall for sports watching parties like NCAA tournament action, and more, all anchored by a one-of-a-kind community. And you also can step outside and find yourself immersed in Salt Lake's hottest dining and nightlife scene as well, with award-winning spots like Urban Hill, Mencho Ramen, Level Crossing, Melancholy Wine Bar, and Sunday's Best, just steps away. So get started today by going and looking for a studio, 1, 2, 3 bedroom, or a penthouse, and find your perfect home today with our friends over at Post District. Visit liveatpost.com or call 801-590-6247. Mention Locked On Cougars in this ad for an exclusive incentive. Once again, go to visit liveatpost.com or call them today at 801-590-6247. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well out there. Just another plug for you guys to join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. If you like the inside scoop on all things BYU sports, I'm hearing. Join us today on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get your updates sent to you via text message, and that you can have one-on-one conversations with myself via text as well. Just $5 a month to be a part of the group, and more importantly, you get a 14-day free trial before you're charged anything. So join us today on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, the BYU football program taking part in their first and I think potentially only full scrimmage of spring camp today. They were originally scheduled to have this on Saturday. Due to the weather, they decided to go indoors and play on turf. And I know that Kalani Sitake has talked about the fact that you always run the risk when you go live on turf of it exacerbates and can actually enhance injuries if they happen on turf. So BYU opted to hold off for better weather today. It's supposed to be in the low to mid 60s here along the Wasatch Front. So they'll get out to the Lavelle Edwards Stadium and have their scrimmage on the grass today. I think this is a huge opportunity for a number of guys to stake claim to why they should be heavier consideration for starting jobs come training camp in August. And why do I think that? Well, simply put, Kalani has made an emphasis this spring of pushing the entire roster. This is a BYU squad that returns a lot of talent. We all know that, a lot of experience. Led by Jake Retzloff, you have experience in the backfield at running back with a guy like LJ Martin. You've got a very experienced wide receiver core led by Chase Roberts. Tight end, you bring in Carson Ryan. And I know that he is a newcomer to BYU, but he's a veteran of 4 NCAA football seasons, so he's got a lot of experience in his own right. He has a lot to prove. Offensive line-wise, BYU's trying to find the next crop of tackles. Is Isaiah Jota capable of holding it down at left tackle? Can Austin Leusa, who's bumped out to right tackle right now, can he hold it down on the right edge for BYU on the offensive line? On the interior, can guys like a Sonny Mocassini, who figures to probably be a backup this season, can he stake claim and say, hey, Kyle Saforchich or Waylon Lapuaho, watch out, I'm coming for your job? Is Bruce Mitchell going to be capable of succeeding Connor Pay at center and make that position his own? There's a lot of conversations that I think that this scrimmage can answer those questions for. The sad part is, and I was hoping we were going to get a chance to go out and watch part of it, but they have shut it down. And that's a bit disappointing, but you guys know how I do here on the podcast. I will reach out to people I know, our so-called practice insiders, and get you the inside scoop. What I'm hearing will be passed along to our Locked On Cougars Insider Group first thing, but on the podcast, I'll be happy to rehash some of what I'm learning about the scrimmage as well. But the other side of it, on the defense, what's BYU's defensive line going to look like? It's a new look defensive line led by Keanu Tanavasa. You have guys on the edge like Orion Maile-Kafusi, who's been a bit of a surprise here in spring camp. Can they live up to the billing and handle themselves and go out and generate pressure on the offense? That's a big question mark. The linebacking core, I know that Isaiah Glasker's out, and I would highly doubt you have guys like Jack Kelly playing many live reps, if any at all, just at the risk of injury to him. But there's other linebackers there who want to assert themselves and say, hey, I absolutely belong in the 2 deep here. I can think of guys like a Siale Acera, Miles Hall. I can think of Ace Kafusi, Micah Kafusi. All those guys in this scrimmage have to go out and prove themselves. Same thing in the defensive secondary. Is Tanner Wall and Raider Demooney, are they capable of asserting themselves once again as the 1-2 tandem at safety for BYU? Well, I think that Tanner Wall is a proven commodity, so I would be expecting he will not see a ton of reps. But what do Faletau Satuwala and Tommy Prasis go out there and show? At cornerback, what does Marcus McKenzie do? What can a guy like Jonathan Cabella or Trey Alexander? I'm throwing a ton of names at you guys, and for good reason, because this is the time. This is the proving ground. The coaches are going to let them tackle, and it's going to be ferocious. It's kind of crazy. I think in some ways in these scrimmages, it can get more physical and more, I don't know how to describe it. It can be more of a chance for injury coming out of scrimmages than in actual games, because let's be frank, these guys know the schemes. They know what's coming at them. They can look at alignments from the offense if you're a defensive player, and conversely, if you're an offensive player looking at the defense, and know, having practiced so often and so long against these schemes, kind of what's coming. And that can allow you to have that leg up saying, okay, here comes an ISO power, or on defense, here comes that pressure from the right side. You can get a jump on that. And it can allow you, like I said, to get an advantage on your opponent, and that can exacerbate potentially some injury situations. It's going to be hard hitting, and that's something that Kalani Sitake, Jay Hill, Aaron Roderick, they have cultivated that into this program. Speaking of it just being a core tenet of this program, they're not here to not hit and not tackle. Kalani has said it. He said the only way we get better at tackling, we get better as a football team, is when we're actually playing the sport of football. And inherent to the tackling and hitting and all the different things that go into the sport, it's a violent sport. You're hitting guys with helmets, with pads, and these are big, burly men who are getting after it on the football field. And it's going to be an interesting dynamic, I think, that comes out of the scrimmage as to, okay, could this set the depth chart going into the offseason? Does that set guys up for success or failure potentially when it comes to roster cuts that are coming? That's the other side of this. And it's been a really kind of downer note to think about this, but BYU is carrying 123 guys on this roster right now, and they will have imposed upon them a roster cut down of at least 18 guys to get to 105 man by the start of the first game this fall. At least 18 guys who have lived the dream, who have been critical cogs, have been practicing as hard as they possibly can, trying to prove themselves worthy of playing for the BYU football program, will not be able to do that. And that roster cut could come even at an even deeper cost, because let's be honest, there's another transfer portal window opening at the end, not the end of this month. It's the middle of next month. I think it's April 15th, if I recall correctly. It's open for 10 days. Guys will leave BYU. Conversely, BYU will be looking at guys to maybe come in and fill gaps that have been discovered here in spring camp. So you're potentially looking at another 20 to, I think, as maybe as high as 30 guys turning over between now and August, when BYU starts training camp. And it's pretty wild to consider, but that's what we're looking at with this BYU football team. But the bigger point to be made is this scrimmage, it's going to be important for a lot of young players who have dreams of those stars in their eyes of being the guys under the lights at LaVell Edwards Stadium with you guys chanting their names, speaking of Cougar Nation. Well, their first opportunity to really assert themselves and show the coaches that everything they've shown in practice to this point it's not fool's gold, to use obviously it's St. Patrick's Day today. If they want to go out there and prove that, now is the time to do it. I am curious to see what Kalani Sitake reveals / doesn't reveal about the scrimmage, because he is very reticent to, I think, go deep into particulars. But I'm fingers crossed that very few, if any, injuries come out of the scrimmage. But at the same time, I hope it proves to be that proving ground that BYU hopes it is for these young players to go out and show that they are, or not that, they are the guy, but also they have what it takes to be kind of that next crop of talent that hopefully can elevate BYU beyond what they accomplished last year. And they accomplished a whole lot. 11-2, Alamo Bowl win. All that is nice, but BYU knows how close they were to playing in a Big 12 title game, to have a chance to go to the college football playoff. That's all they're still on the table for BYU. And now they got to go out and take it and do it with this new crop of talent. And I think today is a real critical day for BYU football players to show that they are the answer BYU is looking for, to maybe give them that little extra edge to get them over the ledge and on to really the true national scene when it comes to the national championship and the like. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On Cougars. A big thank you as always for all y'all's support. I always appreciate the comments, good, bad, or indifferent, so keep them coming. Obviously, share this with your family and friends. Tell them it's daily coverage of the BYU Cougars. And as always, subscribe, rate, review, and thank you for being everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.